Hello friends. Modern science knows only three types of worldview: the first is religious, the second is scientific, and the third is philosophical. And all people, one way or another, choose for themselves one or another way of interpreting the world. The essence of the process is occurring with a person, one or another variety. But most often, a person still prefers to mix these three types of worldview in his consciousness. For example, I am more close to a mixture of scientific and philosophical worldviews. And a smaller part of my beliefs remains for religious myths. In what proportion? It is difficult to answer exactly. Some people, on the contrary, have a predominantly religious worldview. But still, it is difficult to find pure supporters of one or another type of worldview among living people. It is almost always a mixture. Religious, pagan, ethical attitudes, scientific knowledge are mixed in the head. But today in this video I would like to explain to you why it is necessary to develop your philosophical worldview, to pump up this important way of thinking in yourself. In fact, why it is useful for you to listen and watch numerous videos on this channel. Critical thinking skills, rational, scientific and philosophical. And first, I want to quote a short excerpt from William Shakespeare's tragedy about Julius Caesar. Brutus, oh, Cassius, how much grief I have. Cassius, if you lose heart so much before random troubles, then where is your philosophy? This wise quatrain describes the role of philosophy in our lives. Shakespeare's hero Cassius seems to be lecturing Brutus, saying that grief and life's difficulties can only be fought with the help of such an important tool as philosophy. This is simply vital for any person. I will not deliberately try to be clever. I will not give you any definitions of philosophy from Wikipedia, dictionaries, monographs. You yourself will be able to formulate it. Realize how important such a system of understanding the world is to you, giving answers to questions that are important to all of us. Philosophy in the utilitarian sense is, of course, not a science, but a system of understanding, a way of describing and comprehending the world around us. Some people, even intelligent and educated ones, find it very difficult to accept mythologized worldview systems, for example, a religious myth, so people have always looked for something else. A person, like air, needs some kind of support, thanks to which he can become calm and happy, find peace and psychological well-being. You can come up with dozens of other definitions for the concept of philosophy, but the main thing is not this, not an attempt to fit philosophical movements into a scientific framework, to systematize and study the history of philosophy. I will not mention the philosophical ideas of Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, Hegel or Kant today. Some of you may have already studied all this at university, but it is important to understand why each of us personally, each individual philosopher, needs philosophy. The answer is very simple: to come into balance with this world, to get the desired peace, to become successful and happy. A real philosopher is not someone who throws out dozens of complex terms, twists them into complex sentences. A philosopher is someone who has completely reconciled with this world, the difficulties of human existence, and has successfully learned to overcome these difficulties. A real philosopher, I'm not afraid of this word, is not even afraid of his own death, because he understands how everything is arranged, how everything functions in the biological world, in the spiritual sphere, how psychology functions, human behavior. A person with a philosophical worldview does not need religion, does not need to believe in myths invented by someone else, because he himself can generate his own myths and his own ideas, shows creativity. A person with a predominantly philosophical worldview already has a solid foundation under his feet, allowing him to stand firmly and steadily, overcoming difficulties. For example, in one of his old videos, which was called How to Live as an Atheist, On Eternal Life for Non-Religious People, I have already explained in detail why human life is actually eternal and endless. A system of philosophical views, of course, will not protect you from difficulties and troubles, but it will help you overcome them confidently and fearlessly, and look to the future with optimism. Those who have reconciled with the world around them will certainly find their own happiness. Armed with philosophy, a person usually steadfastly and calmly overcomes both minor troubles, insignificant, and serious problems in life, and even great grief. And here I again quote Cassius from Shakespeare's great work: "If you are so discouraged by random troubles, then where is your philosophy?" A smart person accepts any troubles with readiness, with understanding, philosophically. Like a small raft that does not rush to ram the waves, that does not sail against a squall wind. During a storm, such a raft simply rocks with the waves, up and down, up and down. Such a raft always maintains its stability on the surface of the water. But what if there is simply nowhere else to sail? If your last hour has come? Then what to do? A true philosopher, a wise man, dies relatively calmly. The fear of death should not exist for him. Because for him, as for a religious person, our life is eternal and endless. I will leave a link to my old video about endless life in the tips. Maybe someone will want to listen to it. Of course, no one wants to die suddenly in a car accident or from external causes. And in such an emergency, a person, even with a philosophical worldview, most likely will not hold back and will experience fear, resentment, a feeling of annoyance. But dying at an old age, dying from a chronic disease in his bed, a person will usually humbly accept what is destined for him. He will not scream shrilly and wave his arms, he will steadfastly accept even such an inevitable misfortune. Wisdom usually comes with years of life. The main thing is not to confuse this very wisdom with the usually clinical encephalopathy, inhibition of the central nervous system, typical for elderly people. But even such features of the central nervous system, caused by biological aging, are given to a person, probably, for a reason. No, philosophy is given to us, of course, not for accepting our death, but rather for life, for easing our current torments, sufferings, for understanding many important processes and patterns. And here there is a very important watershed between the philosophy that suits you and the one that does not suit you. Those philosophical attitudes that do not give you coherent answers to your internal questions are most likely not suitable for you. In such a case, it will be difficult for you to obtain the sought-after peace and tranquility, it will be difficult to find happiness. And if philosophy does not lead you to happiness, then for a person it is usually useless or even harmful. As an example, philosophy related to the management of society, politics, struggle, social activity, for example, Marxist philosophy. It not only contradicts human biology, but also calls for changing the existing system. Not to float on the waves, like a raft, adapting to changing environmental conditions, but on the contrary, to piss against the wind. To build something new, destructive philosophical and social trends necessarily require the destruction of everything old. The division of people into classes, calls for class struggle, division into historical formations feudal, slave-owning, bourgeois capitalist, communist. And as soon as such an artificial division begins, it means that everything will definitely end in revolution, violence, executions, a lot of bloodshed. In a word, active political struggle and the philosophy that justifies this very political struggle, by definition, cannot be useful for a person for his development and prosperity. Therefore, you will never meet a happy person who is engaged in an active struggle with something. They will always be dissatisfied with something, general inequality, the standard of living, their unhappy fate. And the reason was hidden in the initially incorrectly chosen type of philosophy for their worldview. Many people, in order to get answers to their life questions, are helped by religion and, accordingly, they practically from childhood form a religious worldview. This helps them cope with difficulties in situations where they lack their own resources for such a struggle. Atheists who do not have a philosophical worldview also suffer and torment themselves, torment the people around them, deliberately trying to impose their views on them. In this sense, any activism in itself is a psychologically unhealthy story for a person. For example, active supporters of a healthy lifestyle, activists of various movements, parties, public organizations, and even bloggers, all these are people trying to solve their internal psychological problems with the help of such active work. Thus, the same philosophical idea in different people can work for creation, for happiness, and for destruction. Both militant activists, radical religious movements, and militant atheists, and any radical activists in general, will never by definition be able to become happy and find balance with the outside world. Therefore, they are usually very far from philosophy and a philosophical worldview. If you are constantly offended by someone, if you are nervous and tense, if you are constantly lacking something, then this speaks of only one thing: the absence of a philosophical worldview, the need to develop this love for wisdom in yourself. Unfortunately, most people are not philosophers at all, but people who have not yet decided on their worldview. Over the years, with the accumulation of experience and bumps on the forehead, their philosophical baggage, of course, will increase, but it is quite difficult to call them philosophers. We are not talking about mental abilities, not about cognitive skills. This may be an outstanding scientist, activist, or a competent specialist in a certain field, but it is the lack of a philosophical worldview that can prevent a person from becoming happy. These are my thoughts, friends. There is something to think about. Thank you for your attention. And until next time.